Yeah, very good afternoon to one and yeah, today we are going to discuss about the groundwater. So as we know, all water occurring beneath the ground surface is called groundwater from the various sources. So the water which is occur beneath the ground surface is called groundwater. So it has been estimated the volume of water in the upper 0.8 kilometers of the continental crust, nearly 20 times greater than the combined volume of water in all lake and rivers. So the chief source of groundwater is the downward percolation of the rainwater, is meteoric water. Some groundwater may also be derived from juvenile and connate water. So the juvenile water is a term used for magmatic water, while connate water is water which was entrapped in during the deposition. So here, generally, the groundwater it has been placing below the earth surface or below the earth ground surface. So it is 20 times greater than the combined volume of water in the lakes and the rivers. It has been very clearly shown that. And see, there are the importance of the groundwater. Most of the chief source of groundwater is the downward percolation of the rainwater. It means mostly the meteoric water. Some groundwater may be also be derived from the juvenile and connate water. So the water, juvenile water, the water it has been used for the magmatic water, while connate water is that water which was entrapped in the sedimentary rocks. So it means the water which is belongs to the magmatic water, that water that has been called as magmatic water or juvenile water. Whereas the connate water is the water which has entrapped within the sedimentary rocks during the deposition. So here, generally, the almost whatever the ground resources which has been mostly available in the below the earth surface, mostly the groundwater, it is almost throughout the water. It is about 0.6 percentage being as being a being groundwater. In all these aspects, mostly the groundwater is a major source for the major source for the drinking purpose and industrial purpose and irrigation purpose. So mostly we are using this groundwater for the many other purposes. As we know, wherever we need, whenever we need, from the reservoirs, from the rivers, we can utilize this water as a source of groundwater. Mostly, most of the people are using as a drinking water as a source of groundwater. So the daily life, so most of the groundwater it has been industrial for the industrial purposes. Most of the industries are depends on the groundwater, and it's about in our country it's about 15 to 20 percentage of people are using the groundwater as their drinking water. So here there are certain sources for the groundwater, where the sources of groundwater, mostly the groundwater sources is, so way in the atmosphere, generally in the atmosphere when it's condensation, the atmospheric moisture has become condensation to form as rain, and some of the glaciers which has been mostly evaporated, and again they condensate to form as rain to the earth's surface. It is about 1/4 of water in the form of streams, the rivers, which are formed above the earth surface, and it has finally reached to the seas, oceans, means the low-lying areas again. So some of the water which has been
Sir,
trapped,
please, sir, page number, sir.
entrapped, yes, the black
Sir, please.
core,
Sir, please, sir. Page number, page number.
the black core, open the black core groundwater. I think it is 89.
Thank you, sir.
Groundwater, okay. So the sources of groundwater, as we know, the sources of groundwater, mostly the groundwater sources are the, mostly we can say the rainwater is a major source for the groundwater, being to percolation into the ground. Yes, as we know, the groundwater it's become when it's raining, some of the water is percolated into the ground, and some of the water is becoming as a runoff on the earth surface. So some of the water has been entrapped in the within the rocks, so altogether, it has been quite happens to store the groundwater. It depends upon the source of rains, all the aspect. So here, in such a way, these are the major sources mostly. In some of the water which has been the earth crust, there are different type of rocks which are having their fractures, maybe their cracks, or fissures, or vesicles, or pores, water, and all these empty spaces or vacuums. When it's raining, the water has been entrapped within the rocks, and it has been depends upon the various characteristic features of the rock and their moisture conditions and their topography, and the depends upon the foresty regions and porosity and the permeability. Mostly plays a major role to form as a groundwater. And let's see the distribution of the groundwater. As we know, most of the water it has been on the earth's surface, and this water it has been through the what you can call it as potholes and springs. Most of the water it has been due to the capillary forces through the fractures. It has been evaporated to the atmosphere, and it has been formulated where there are so many sources for the cracks and fractures, such as mostly the open wells, and it has been naturally distributed in the below the earth crust. So the water it has been distributed in the various sources and the various places. It means in the below the earth crust it has been overspread, widely spread in the various sources in the below the earth crust. So here, as we know, the most of the groundwater become it has been entrapped as we know the juvenile water are also known as magmatic water, which is related to the magmatic sources, and the connate water, which is the water which has been entrapped in the sedimentary deposits or sedimentary rocks. So this, which is going to be seen very clearly to occur the groundwater. And here there are different types of zones which has been very clearly shown, where it has been uh, given the a scope for the availability of groundwater. Mostly here there you can see the vertical distribution. The vertical distribution of groundwater we can see there is a what you can call it as is soil water or moisture belt and water table and the ground source and the combined water, which has been mostly a zone of aeration and zone of saturation, and mostly the water table, which has been very clearly seen in all this aspect. So here it has been quite seen for the various aspect, mostly which has been fluctuated in the various sources of distribution. See, the vertical distribution of groundwater, it is very good, even as a question comes regularly. The vertical distribution of groundwater. So, in the below the earth surface, the water, how it is distributed in various zones. So, the groundwater is distributed in the various zones in which we can say the different depends upon the zones or availability of water. We can classify it into the zone of aeration, zone of saturation, zone of aeration and zone of saturation, mostly we can say. So here, the zone of saturation is where it has been seen up to certain depth, at very shallower depth, the water resources are not there or water resources are very lacking conditions. We can call it as this zone is known as a zone of aeration. Then coming to zone of saturation. So zone of saturation is a zone which has enough adequate concentration of adequate water facilities are available in this zone, so that we can call it as a zone of saturation. So here mostly it is satisfied or adequate water resources are present in this zone, and that is zone of saturation. Mostly in this zone, whatever the rocks which are present, their fractures are fulfilled by this groundwater, so that it has whatever the rocks which are present in this zone, it means zone of saturation. So they are what you can call it as they are filled with their cracks or their pores or their vesicles which are filled with the water. That's why they named after this saturation zone of saturation. So in this upper surface of the groundwater, the saturated surface of the groundwater, we can call it as water table. The upper ground surface of the saturation zone is called as water table. This water table is maybe having of depressions and elevations. It is not uniform because having of the sources of facilities or having of the fluctuation in the groundwater, it is distinguished from the place to place, so that the groundwater table should not be uniform. It has been having some elevations and depressions, so in this water table. So generally in this zone where we can see certain facilities are going on, it has been mostly going on the what are the particles which has quite going on. So in this zone where we can see certain variations or the certain distinguished characteristics of rocks, which has mostly it resembles their porosity and permeability. How the rocks, which has been a sources for the water, we can see in this zone of saturation. And this groundwater table, mostly it has been satisfied with water. So in this upper surface of the saturation zone, upper surface of the saturation zone, we can call it as a groundwater table. Yes, upper surface of the saturation zone. So saturation zone is having adequate water facilities or adequate water facilities, which has been quite mostly have enough water, in which that is why we can call it as zone of saturation. In this zone of saturation, the upper surface of the saturation zone, I'll call it, you can call it as a groundwater table. So in this groundwater table, mostly it has been having different levels. It depends upon the place to place or areas to area. But because all the areas is not uniformly recharged by the rainwater, so that the groundwater table will be having some depressions and elevations, or it is not uniform. It is not uniform throughout the areas. It has been quite a difference, as we know very well. A very good example in our surroundings, where you can drill a borewell for the irrigation purpose. Somewhere else we can, somewhere else we got the water at a depth of 200 feet, 250 feet. But whereas other places, even 500 feet, 1,000 feet, we didn't get any water. Yes. So these are the experience we can. It is clearly shows that the groundwater table will not be same. Height will be not same from the Earth surface. So as we are seeing the different zones, which has been quite resembles in the different types of whatever the hot springs, some of the springs, as we know, the hot springs or artesian wells. Mostly we can see the artesian wells and hot springs, because due to the geological conditions or the geological settings of the formations, due to the hot springs and artesian wells, or mostly we can see the what is the artesian wells. The artesian wells are the wells which can pump out the water from the ground from the below the earth surface without any submersible pumps. So the groundwater can be supplies, the groundwater can be pumping out to the ground surface. The groundwater can be pumped out to the ground or earth surface or ground surface without any without any submersible pumps. Yes. So because it is a geological condition or geological setting in a formations. So because of these conditions, that water can be pumped out without any need of submersible pumps. So such type of wells, we can call it as a artesian wells. Such type of wells we can call it as a artesian wells. So these artesian wells, we can see very rare conditions, and where the groundwater level will be very high and very nearer to the earth surface. And we can see the hot springs. So due to the geological conditions, even the hot springs where the during the groundwater levels, the fractures are mostly, so the what are the fractures which are available in the earth surface. So these, along through these fractures, the groundwater can be pumped out along through these fractures and fissures, so that the groundwater will be pumped out to the earth surface along through these weaker zones or fractures or fissures. So which are called hot springs, which are called the hot springs here, which is these are depends upon the geological conditions in the below the earth crust. See, coming to a perched water table, as we know, a perched water table is a zone which is very nearer to the earth surface, which has very nearer to the earth surface. So it is having very little amount of water, which is having very little amount of water. So this perched water table is a zone very, it is very nearer or shallower to the earth surface. It has very little amount of water. We can't consider as a what you can call it as, it is present in the zone of aeration or Vedas zone, or it is where it has impervious rock. So the impervious, mostly the impervious rocks means the rocks are having porosity capacity but don't have the permeability. So here generally what happens, a porosity is the presence of pores or holes or vesicles. The volume of vesicles present in a, the ratio of the volume of vesicles are present in a unit volume of rock. We can call it as porosity. Simply in terms, we can call it as the presence of holes. The porosity ante sachidrat antam Telugu we can say. So it is consisting of some vesicles or holes or pores in a rock. So this nature we can call it as a porosity. So if porosity is available, porosity is there, but there is no permeability. Permeability is a character to allow the water along the substance. It is a permeability is a character in which it is a property of allowing the material, allowing the substances along through allowing the water along through the substances, which is called permeability. So the impervious rocks are the not capable to conduct or not capable to permit the water along through these rocks. So they are called as impervious rocks. So the pervious rocks are they are the capability to transfer the water along through this. So which are called a permeable rocks or pervious rocks. So here mostly the perched water table. So perched water tables are mostly they are which is present in the impervious rock strata or impervious formations. As we know, the impervious rocks, as it is, for example, best example, clay and mudstone. Yes, as we know, what you can call it as mudstone and clay. So these are the best example being impervious rocks. So they are have very good porosity, but they don't have permeability nature, so that they are not allowing the water, so that it has holds the water. The impervious rocks, it holds the water, so that very, even though very nearer to the earth surface, we got the, when we are drilling, we got the water very nearer to the earth surface, but we can't satisfy this water because it is not a sufficient water which we need exactly for our different purposes. So it is just very impervious rock. So it is very mostly it has not been transported through this, so which is called as a perched water table. Then coming to a porosity and permeability. As we know, the porosity and permeability, mostly you can say so. Coming to a porosity, generally a porosity is a quantity of groundwater that can be stored in rock. It depends on its porosity. So generally, the quantity of groundwater, the amount of groundwater that can be stored in a rock depends on its porosity. So therefore, porosity is defined as the pore spaces in rocks. The pore spaces in rocks, it is defined as the percentage of pore spaces existing in a given volume of rock. The percentage of pore spaces given in a existing passing through the unit cross. So which can be expressed in terms of the percentage of pore spaces which are present mostly in the where the unit volume of rock. We can say unit volume of rock, mostly it is defined as a percentage of pore spaces existing in a so yeah, existing in a given volume of rocks. So it is widely in porosity. The loose sand and gravel may have porosity up to a 50 percentage. As we know, so it is a pore spaces. The pore percentage of pore spaces. Pores means vesicles or holes. Randralu antam kada. So whatever the holes which are present in a rock. So the percentage of the percentage of pore spaces existing in a given volume of rock. The rocks vary widely in porosity. The rocks are varying the loose sand and gravel. The loose sand and gravel may have porosity up to 50 percentage. Sandstones up to 15 percentage. So while porosity of igneous rocks is of the order to 2 percentage, 3 percentage. As we know, the porosity of igneous rocks, as we know, the igneous rocks are very compacted. Yes, means very hard. So in which mostly we cannot say the pore spaces. Yes, so we can see only in the fractures. Yes, those fractures we can see some structural characters we can see, but pore spaces are very minute, so that the porosity of igneous rocks they are very minute. That is about 2 to 3 percentage, 2 to 3 percentage. Whereas coming to sedimentary rocks, why? Because sedimentary rocks are very loose. As we know, the sedimentary rocks are the consolidated by sediments or grains or particles which are together cemented by the cementing material, so that they are not much stronger. Yes, they are not much stronger than the igneous rocks. They are very loose sediments. The sediments are compacted, so there is a chances to availability of vesicles or holes on it, so that the sediment rocks are having the much percentage of porosity. Porosity have much percentage. It is about up to 50 percentage. But whereas the igneous and metamorphic rocks, even the metamorphic rocks are also they are very compacted, so that there are also porosity percentage is very less. So this is about it is about 3 to 4 and 3 to 5 percentage in metamorphic rocks. Then coming to permeability. So the permeability of a rock is its ability to transmit water. Yes, permeability is the so of a rock is its ability to transmit water. It is measured by the quantity of water. It is measured by the quantity of water passing passing through a unit cross section of an aquifer. So a permeability, try to understand the concept. A permeability of a rock is its ability. It is the ability to transmit water. Permeability is its ability to transmit the water. It is measured by the quantity of water passing through a unit cross section of an aquifer in an unit time under 100% of hydraulic gradient. So the permeability in which full depth and unit of the aquifer is called a transmissibility. So the transmissibility which has been explained by how it has been showing in the various sources of water and where it has showing in the various aspect of different type of rocks as we know, and these different types of rocks are having different type of percentages and their what you can call it as permeability capacities. So it depends upon the permeability mostly present in the aquifer rocks. So what does it mean by aquifers? So aquifer is a permeable rock formation which store groundwater. So permeability we can see the permeability in aquifers. So what does it mean by aquifer? The term aquifer represents a permeable rock formation. It is a permeable rock formations which store groundwater. The aquifer is a permeable rock formations, a permeable rock formations which store groundwater and transmit a sufficient quantity of it to pumping well are called aquifers. So here, generally, the aquifer rock, it has, as usual, it has porosity and permeability. So in the aquifer rocks, we have porosity, we have, and permeability we have. Means porosity, it is a capacity to store the groundwater, to store the water, porosity. Permeability, it has ability to transport the water, to transmit the water. Yes, to transmit the water. It is ability to transmit the water. So in aquifers, we can see the porosity and where we can see the porosity and the permeability. Then only that formation could be said to be aquifer. So this aquifer is is a very good concentration of groundwater, and it is showing a pumping well. And it is most of the bore wells where the aquifers are there below the ground. So if it is aquifer zones are there, and our bore well should be a successful to pump the well. So which are called aquifers. So the impermeable beds that do not yield water and hinder or prevent water movement are called aquicludes. So we should learn some terms: aquifers, aquicludes. So the aquiclude is a impermeable layer. Impermeable means which is not permeable, which is not transmit, which is not able to which is not able to transmit the water. So impermeable layers. So these impermeable layers are mostly, we can say, mostly where we can see the beds that do not yield water and hinder or even prevent water movement are called aquicludes. So those rock formations which do not have porosity and permeability or holding capacity or water yielding holding capacity or transmitting capacity, we can say that is rock is belongs to aquicludes. So the aquifers are divided into two groups: unconfined aquifers and confined aquifers. Yes, the aquifers are broadly divided into confined aquifers and unconfined aquifers. As we know, the name itself indicating confined aquifers. Confined aquifers, that aquifer is confined by both either overlying and underlying by the impervious layers. Such type of structure, such type of geological condition, we can call it as a confined aquifers. So the aquifer means rock formation. The aquifer rock formation, it is confined, overlying and underlying by the impervious layers. Such type of geological condition, we can call it as confined aquifers. And coming to the unconfined aquifers, the name itself indicating unconfined, that aquifer it is not confined by the impervious layers. So it is means it above or below it is open to the pervious layers. So that such type of structural phenomena of aquifers are called as unconfined aquifers. Then coming to wells and springs. So as we know, the wells and springs mostly, most of the groundwater, as we are seeing as a wells and different type of artesian wells and opening to the ground surface, mostly as we are seeing. For we are having a pumping wells. Mostly we can see a different type of wells. The most common device used to men for tapping groundwater is a well, as we are using the common device which is used by men for tapping groundwater is a well. So the well is a vertical opening or shaft excavated into the zone of saturation. So what is a well? A well is a vertical opening. Yes, the tube wells, bore wells, as we are seeing in the agriculture practices. Yes, so the well is a vertical opening or shaft excavated into the zone of saturation. Yes, excavated into the zone of saturation. Well serves Generally, well serves as reservoirs into which groundwater moves and from which it can be pumped to the surface. So the amount of water that a well will yield, yes, the amount of water that a well will yield depends on chiefly the permeability of the aquifer, thickness of the aquifer, and diameter of the well. So generally, the amount of water that well will be yield depends on. So it means how much amount of the yielding capacity. We can call it as simply we can call it as yielding capacity. So yielding capacity depends upon the chiefly there are three major characters. They are permeability of the aquifer. What is the amount of permeability of the aquifer? Thickness of the aquifer, and the diameter of the well. So it is quite depends upon these three parameters of the how much amount of yield of the aquifer. So generally, types of wells also we have dug wells, driven wells, bored wells, jetted wells, drilled wells. But here we can see there is no much classification in this BSc level. So this is just wells and springs. Yeah, coming to springs. When the groundwater flows out at the ground surface, when the groundwater flows out at the ground surface, it is called a spring. It means when the groundwater flows out at the ground surface or earth surface, it is called a spring. So the springs are formed at places where water table intersects the ground surface. This is what we need to understand. So these springs. So where do springs are obtained or where do springs we get? The springs are formed at a depth of mostly they form at places where water table intersects. So it means where the water tables are which are going to be intersect. So the water tables are we can say the aquifers. Mostly the springs it's going to form at places where the water table. What is the water table? The upper saturation surface of the upper surface of the saturation zone. Yes, the upper surface of the saturation zone is known as water table or groundwater table. Yes, so these springs are formed at places where the water table intersects the ground surface. Where the water table is going to intersecting the ground surface, generally automatically the springs comes out. In Telugu we can say మనం నీటి బుగ్గలు ఊట బుగ్గలు అంటుంటాం. సో మోస్ట్లీ ఎక్కడైతే మన గ్రౌండ్ వాటర్ చాలా నియర్ టు ద అర్త్ సర్ఫేస్, భూమికి చాలా దగ్గరగా ఉందనుకోండి గ్రౌండ్ వాటర్, ఆటోమేటిక్గా ఏమవుతుంది మనకు భూమి నుంచి భూమి యొక్క ఉపరితలం పైన నీరు అనేది ప్రవహిస్తూ ఉంటుంది. నీటి బుగ్గల రూపంలో నీరు అనేది ప్రెషర్ తోటి పంపింగ్ అవుతా ఉంటుంది, అన్నా కదా. సో దీస్ ఆర్ ద యూ కెన్ కాల్ ఇట్ స్ప్రింగ్స్, నీటి బుగ్గలు అంటాం మనం వీటిని. So which are without any submersible pumps, the water can be supplied or water can be flows out on the earth surface, which is called a springs. So here there are certain type of springs which has been very clearly, and also artesian or mostly we can see the and wells, artesian springs or artesian wells are also very things, because the term it has been derived from the place where we can get the artesian place. So artesian wells, generally, as we saying, when a well is drilled in a confined aquifer, So artesian wells are the wells when a well is drilled in a confined aquifer, the groundwater in it rises towards the surface. Such a well is called artesian wells. So when we are going to drill a bore well into the confined aquifer, already I told that there are two types of aquifers, confined aquifers and unconfined aquifers. So confined aquifer లో ఏముంటది ఆ aquifer ని aquifer ను ఆవరించి above and below there is a impervious layers ఉంటాయి. సో impervious layers ఉన్నప్పుడు ఏమైతుంది వాటర్ ప్రెషర్ అక్కడే స్టోర్ చేయబడి పర్వియస్ లేయర్ లో ఉంటుంది. సో కాబట్టి there is no chances to go to the upside, there is no chances to go to the downward side because with this formation this aquifer is confined by above and below or overlying and underlying by the impervious layers, so that the water has been pressurely and stored in this aquifer. So when we are going to drill a well into this confined aquifer and the groundwater it rises towards the surface, automatically pressure ga untadi kabatti water it is rises towards the surface. Such type of wells are called artesian well. The conditions necessary for the artesian flow are as follows. So this is conditions is very mandatory for the artesian wells as we are seeing. So this is very much important for the groundwater and the groundwater activities like caves. So the groundwater and their actions and their geophysical physical reactions can be takes place in the groundwater. Mostly they are the caves. So mostly in the limestone regions and dolomite regions, this groundwater when it's passing or when it's mobilization due to the chemical reaction, it makes chemically dissolved. The limestone regions are chemically reacted and dissolved in the groundwater and to form as caves. Mostly the Belen caves, Borra caves in Vizag, they are the best way, very good example for the caves. And the topography or cost areas, mostly the irregular terrain produced largely by the underground solution of limestones is called a cost topography, which has been making a sinkholes, a stalactites and stalagmites which are going to form, and groundwater deposits. As we know, the groundwater deposits of mostly the solutions which has been calcium, magnesium, and carbonates, colloids, silica. These are the different type of groundwater deposits which are going to form by their chemical reactions and their petrifications. Also, we can see a different type of regions, and also the cave deposits. The cave deposits are mostly, we can say, the stalactites and stalagmites from the roof, the Borra caves or caves. From the roof, the water it has been percolating and it has been forming the from the roof towards downward movement. It is called as stalactites, and from the ground surface, it has been rising towards upward direction. The stalagmites and stalagmites are the which are the very good cave deposits due to the chemical reaction of groundwater passage, and springs and deposits are going to form while they are going to be formation of groundwaters. And yeah, this is about the groundwater. Okay, yeah, I'm going to stop the class. My class is over. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir. Sir, request, sir.
చెప్పండి.
సార్ మెయిన్ ఎగ్జామ్స్ ఎప్పుడు ఉంటాయి సార్?
Yeah, it
ఒక
is on
నోటిఫికేషన్ వచ్చింది.
17th of March. I came to know that 17th of March, I think.
ఓకే, ప్రాక్టికల్ ఎగ్జామ్స్ ఎప్పుడు ఉంటాయి సార్? మెయిన్ ఎగ్జామ్స్ తర్వాత ఉంటాయా లేకపోతే బిఫోరే ఉంటాయి సార్?
Maybe it is after the main examination, but final notification will not release. Once they let me know and I will give the complete information.
Okay, sir.
That information I will post in the group today evening itself. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye.